Hey everybody, this is Jon Croft with Cultural Warfare with Jon Croft, and this is Jon Croft. How's everybody doing? Rebecca's here, of course. How you
Hi.
doing? Hey Rebecca.
How's it going, John?
Going good. Going
Good.
great. So yeah, this week we've been doing a whole ton of conjugating about moving and about doing new stuff, haven't we?
Yeah, lots of meetings. It's been a week of meetings,
Yep, been great.
very important business meetings.
Hmm. Many people would grow impatient with us. We're like, let's try this option. Next day we're like, let's think about this other option. And the next day we're like, there's a third, totally different option. And
Yeah.
so, and all of them are pretty different from each other. So we're having
Well,
to, as Jessica calls it, we're having to brainstorm.
yes, she reminded us that we were still in the brainstorming
Yep.
phase.
It's a good reminder. So have you been having a good time this week?
Yes, yes, I have. Well, I know you were probably going to talk about this, but I've been really enjoying in the morning. John has been reading to us from Out of the Silent Planet,
Yep.
and that's just a favorite of ours. I think our daughter has read it on her own, although this was probably a few years ago. And then I read it um, at least once, and I know you've enjoyed it as well. And it's just so unique. And it's basically a science fiction written by C.S. Lewis. He wrote it in the 40s. So it's retro science fiction. And um, it's really just beautifully written.
Mm.
And I don't know what you were going to say about it, but my favorite quote, it's just such a very like C.S. Lewis quote is when the main human character is talking to the alien character. And um,
Ransom.
yes, Ransom is the main character who is a human. And then he's speaking with the, let's see, what are they called again?
The Harassa?
Harasa. Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go. And he says, the Harasa says to him, a pleasure is never fully grown until it is remembered. And I
Mm.
just love that. I just love that quote. That just totally fits with the lifestyle of like enjoying God and enjoying the life that he gives us.
Mm.
And it was just so, yeah, it was such a good quote. But there's so
Yeah,
much to say
it is great.
about that book. What was there anything you wanted to say about it?
It's like he comes from a different era, C.S. Lewis. Like he comes from the era where men sit around with tweed suits and pipes and talk about pleasures of life,
Yeah,
and what are the truly great pleasures, like, and they're not talked down for being a little bit too old-fashioned
yeah,
or things like this. Young people today, they just talk old men down. They don't listen to old wisdom, sadly. And listen to the true pleasures of life. But the Harassa, the Sorn, and I think they're called the Fifiltrigi,
yeah,
the three races of people on Malacandria. They all are, what is it called? They are all Hanau. I guess that means that they are all sentient beings,
yeah,
and they all have a form of respect for each other in their differences.
yeah,
So that's pretty cool, pretty special. Kind of imagining of um, a civilization on Mars, which they call Malacandria, and it's a really great story. It's a different envisioning of the answer to the question of if life lives on other planets. It's a different envisioning rather than our modern conception of aliens, which is always kind of scary and foreboding, and because people think that superior life is always going to be more intelligent, which means it will kill us off and destroy us.
Yeah.
Which, of course, to the academic, more intelligence means they are more malicious, evil, and destructive. So
Yeah.
I don't know if this means that they consider themselves to be more intelligent and therefore they will destroy you, or if
Yeah.
or if this means they fear someone more intelligent than them who will destroy them if they were discovered. But in any event, it's sort of an interesting thing that academics project onto aliens, isn't it? This idea.
Yeah. Because the alien races that are on this planet turn out to be gentle and humble
Hmm.
and not violent at all, and they don't even really understand the concept of violence because C.S. Lewis is probably writing from this perspective of, having been a part of the two major wars that were going on. And so the character Ransom is always trying to find out, well, who is the most dominant, which is the dominant race of your planet. And they
Right.
just have no idea what he's talking about. Um, and he keeps trying to ask about um, just just evil ways, like self-centered human sort of questions, and they just have
It's called
no.
bent.
Yeah,
The human beings are bent.
that was the only word they could come up with to describe it because they didn't even have words for things like
Yeah.
evil and stuff like that.
Right. So I wouldn't describe it in terms of violence because I think that the Harassa are fully capable of violence. What they think of is in terms of bent, like unuseful, unhelpful, senseless violence that doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
Obviously, violence in defense of their own people, violence to hunt, these are all things that make sense.
yeah,
And the kind of violence we see from humanity, as pictured in the book, is bent and does not really make sense.
right. And it's specifically the characters, Weston and Divine, those are the baddies. They have no like real respect for life.
Yeah,
That's the main thing about them is they have no real respect for human life. They're just out for their own
they're
financial
for their own
gain.
benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think Weston's arc, I think he at first appears to be just this guy who wants to do things for the cause of science, whatever that means. But then I think it's revealed later that he is doing it for self-preservation. So he believes that he's trying to save the planet essentially by killing people for his cause.
Yeah.
And and of course his methods are not very benevolent, even though he claims that they are. He claims they're benevolent by kidnapping Ransom and then attempting to sacrifice him to um, these Hanau on Malacandria. So you can see that you can see the ethical dilemmas here. There are the baddies, as you term it, and then there's the heroes who are kind of unwitting victims in many ways to these guys, Weston and Divine. But
Yeah.
it's just a great story. It's a different envisioning of sci-fi. He even mentions H.G. Wells in the story, and
Yeah.
but he mentions him in a really great, charming way because the hero Ransom, when Ransom is imagining the aliens on the way to Malacandria, he has these horrible bug-like, creature-like imaginary
Yeah.
images in his head, and he says he gets those from the H.G. Wells stories he had
Yeah.
read. And flipping it on its head, of course, C.S. Lewis changes it where the aliens are more humane than humans and
Yes.
make more sense and
Yeah.
are more loving and Hanau than the humans.
Yes.
So the silent planet, of course, ends up being Earth, which they call Thulcandria. And it's silent because the Oyarsa does not speak to the Oyarsa on Earth. So all the rest of the planets speak with one another. They all have communication and communion with one another through the Oyarsa. And so the Oyarsa is like a planet area god or a divine kind of leader, an angel of sorts, possibly. But in the world of the story, Oyarsa is kind of like a god over that planet, right? Maybe a lowercase g, sure, but to those people, almost like a god. But they also know that the Oyarsa, that there is an overlord called Melilil, I believe. Um, Melilil, which sounds like Eldil or Eldila. The Eldila are the angels who not everybody can see. And it's just, I don't know. I love these kinds of stories. He actually, this cosmic trilogy, I call it, which some people don't call it that. They call it the space trilogy, even though you're not supposed to call it the space trilogy. People call it that. Because C.S. Lewis himself said, don't call it that. And people call it that anyway, which is not very respectful. Come on. So, so in the cosmic trilogy, it really deeply influenced me. And it was what got me to start writing when I was a teenager. I didn't have the discipline to write, but I would come up with ideas for stories a lot. And there's some of them that still are with me to this day. One of them I call Trinity, and it's a very similar kind of story to the yeah, I was about to call it the space trilogy myself. The cosmic trilogy, sure, whatever. Uh some people call it the ransom trilogy, which is a good one, good term for it. But some of the concepts here that really stuck with me were the idea that humans are more irrational than aliens. And this only makes sense when you think about it. Whenever we make sci-fi, it's always very irrational and fear-based. So C.S. Lewis was really onto something there when he started that premise to his trilogy. And the fact also that our planet was kind of separated from the rest of the world by choice, almost like by design. And that's because of the fallen state of mankind. So I found that to be a really interesting concept, that the way we look at outer space is as a cold, dead place, and yet it could very well be the opposite of that. So I find that really interesting. That's probably the one of the biggest media experiences we've had this week. Although we also have the Wayfinders trailer.
Yeah, yeah, it looks exciting. Um, it looks really exciting. It looks kind of like a show. Well, it's on Angel Studios, and it
Yeah,
looks kind
actually,
of
why don't we
like
just play it and then
okay.
talk about it? It's like, why not just play it?
What a fun adventure this is.
There's a reason why you're flunking out of school, and you have no actual friends.
You don't know anything about me.
Why are you wasting your potential?
We're lost.
You can't get lost in a loop.
Wait, guys, I think this is some kind of puzzle.
Where are we? It's like a video game! Like Skyrim!
How did you get here?
We don't want any trouble.
Too late for that, Wayfinders.
Wait, what now?
Prophecy speaks of three heroes: a warrior, thief, and a mighty sorcerer.
Is that pepper spray? I live in a trailer park.
We need to get home.
At least someone's gonna notice you're gone.
They look at us and they think that they have us all figured out.
Hunt them down and kill them.
This place is so lit.
Wow. It says first episode April. So that means the first episode must have already come out, and I haven't even seen it. And then the first full season is December. So I guess they'll be coming out maybe an episode per month or something like that. It looks it's pretty snazzy. So what were you saying about it before?
Yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. It looks like I mean the main characters are teenagers, so it looks like that's sort of the audience. Um, and they're all, they've obviously found some kind of portal into a enchanted medieval type realm, which is pretty neat. And I liked that dragon shot at the end.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting that they show one of the main characters reading The Cosmos by Carl
Hmm.
Sagan.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, that's one of the shots right in the beginning. So I don't know.
Not the best reference. That you know what
Yeah.
they should have referenced? They should have referenced the book of Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh, yeah.
Bam. Guess what? This looks like a modern reimagineering of the Chronicles of Narnia.
Mm. Yeah, I
It
could kind of
does.
see that.
Kids, they all go through this thing. They go into a fantastical medieval like realm
Right.
with
Yeah.
animals that attack them and all this other stuff.
Yeah, that's true. That would have been a nice tie-in.
And the people already have a prophecy that they would show up, etc.
Yeah.
Kind of pretty Narnian.
Mm-hmm.
That could be
Yeah.
either good or not so good, right? Because you do too many similarities and you're like ripping off Narnia eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully they're not doing that. It's like it's almost like they're trying to modernize Narnia, right?
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. Because all the language they, oh, this place is lit and I've come from a
Yeah.
trailer park and all their kind of catty attitudes and silly attitudes. Uh
Yeah.
they're trying to update the characters, I think, to make them
Mm.
less English, classical English, aware of classical literature, aware of the medieval world, aware of all of these things, and instead they're kind of dealing with challenges of life in the modern world, which is possibly different from a World War II kind of situation in England with family, possibly lost family in the war. So it's going from a family, a tight-knit family. Sure, they might have bickering and difficulties, but they're a family. And then you go to kind of more of a high school environment where nobody's really family. They're more like home away from home, kind of the American conception of high school, you know? And so there's not a lot of familial connection. And so I think that's one of the things that they're trying to use to modernize it more.
Yeah.
But almost everything else looks like Narnia.
Yeah.
That said, I know that sounds like a complaint, but that said, it looks well made.
Mm-hmm. It
The
really
the visual
does.
effects look excellent,
Yeah.
And also one thing that's really important to note is Angel Studios has not put a lot of content out for this age demographic yet, for like the teenage and young adult demographic.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important that they're doing that because this is a severely underserved kind of market. And when it is served, it's often with terrible content,
Mm-hmm.
stuff that's not really appropriate for like 16, 17-year-olds. I know that kids that age like to think they can watch anything. And Hollywood takes advantage of that. Hollywood takes advantage of the fact that kids who are 15, 16 are peer pressured into watching all kinds of stuff they should not watch.
Mm.
This started when I was a kid because people like Steven Spielberg were corrupting the whole rating system by putting out stuff in the PG-13 demographic. but it was stuff that like, older kids really should be watching instead of younger kids. And, bad language, mild nudity, violence, a lot of stuff that I think a 13-year-old shouldn't be watching. And stuff that also that's pretty scary, quite often. So that's what was happening in the 80s. And then and I remember the attitude too when I was younger, that if you were like a teenager at all, it's like you were expected, like with your friends, to go out and see rated R movies. Like people would just do that kind of thing. And it was considered kind of normal. But I don't think that was good for that to happen because I mean the ratings are there for a reason, and I think parents really should be involved in helping kids make these decisions because they're kids, you know. So, one really important thing is that this means that this demographic is underserved because why? People in the world are making either family friendly content, stuff that's for preteens or younger, or stuff for adults, rated R. And so, because they know they don't need to abide by a PG-13 rating. And they know that instead of making stuff like Chronicles of Narnia, which is actually a far better type of story for kids that age, they're making stuff that is like actually for adults. And then kids are getting peer pressured to watch it in like horror films and stuff like that. And so Hollywood makes a lot of R-rated content and they actually make it for like teenagers,
Yeah.
knowing that the teenagers will sneak in.
Mm.
So this is a corruption of the whole rating system. Like why even have a rating system if you're going to continually subvert it? And so what that means is Hollywood Hollywood thinks they can subvert these things, and all it really does is creates an underserved market. And that means people who really want to follow the rules, maybe they're faith-based filmmakers or conservatives or what have you, more traditional storytellers, people who could do storytelling for families, for example, they can create content that is for teenagers, that's appropriate for teenagers, and could like make bank and also make stories that really are educational and helpful for kids that age. You know, it could teach history, it could teach all kinds of great lessons of life.
Yeah.
And instead of subverting it and making, giving them an R rating, just make it appropriate to their age. So hopefully this is a good sign that there will be more stuff like this that is appropriate to the teenage years. I really enjoyed stuff like that. You can always have things like mild violence. You can have like difficult situations and action and interesting sci-fi or fantasy. There's no reason you can't have all that cool stuff. You just shouldn't have like really bad language, like sexual innuendo, stuff like that, and or political stuff. Like you shouldn't have that stuff in there. Have stuff about life, learning about the lessons of life. A lot
There,
of a lot of C.S. Lewis's stuff is perfect for that.
yeah. There's a Ted Deckard book series right now called And They Found Dragons, I think it's called.
Oh yeah.
Um and that could possibly be a good
Teenage
teenage
story.
thing for the
Cool.
teens.
Yeah.
Um it's hard to explain the concept, but it's basically just that there are dragons on Earth and some are good and some are bad, and the main character is a follower of Yeshua, but nobody ever talks about Yeshua anymore. And so it's kind of a dystopian, all the teens love the dystopian books.
Sure. Yeah.
supposedly.
Good stuff.
But I liked how Lore had a show that I think was targeted at teens called First in Class.
Or do you mean subclass?
That's what I meant. Yeah, subclass.
Yeah, subclass. Yep.
And that was a little bit like kind of like a mutant story, I think,
Hmm.
where the kids had these special abilities and nobody understood them, you know.
I think it's not so much a mutant story as it is a because you're probably thinking of X-Men, but
Uh,
it's more like genetic engineering.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes more sense now that you mention it. I'm remembering that. Oh, of course, you were saying that show hasn't actually been made yet. They've just been,
No, they're
it's in
funding for it.
progress. Yeah.
Yeah, they're in funding. Who knows how much they've actually shot? I mean, obviously they got a trailer out, so they must have shot some of it, but they probably just haven't completed it yet. I think a lot of these projects, when they do funding, they actually put up the money to shoot it, but then they don't have the money to complete it. So, because post-production can take a long time, especially with this kind of thing, because they have visual effects and things like that, because it's a sci-fi, you know. So they're gonna require possibly a few million dollars to finish it, you know. I mean, if you want to get good visual effects, it's gonna take some real talent to do that kind
Yeah.
of. But yeah, Lore TV, they have some of this, some interesting stuff like that. Obviously, they're a Christian streamer, and they're trying to do a little bit more daring, interesting stuff for um, the younger demographic, I guess you could call it, which is great. We need more of that kind of stuff instead of like Marvel superhero stuff. Get something new, you know?
Yeah.
But and speaking of something new, like I mean, we talked about C.S. Lewis. Often the something new is something old that's been discarded in the last 50 years. And then some kid will pick it up again and be like, why is nobody talking about this?
Hmm.
Why does nobody care about this stuff? This stuff is really great, you know? And that's the kind of stuff I love too. Like I love like because I was brought up with the arts, and then not many other people around me caring about it. So I knew a lot of the Christian musicians nobody knew about. I learned a lot about the Christian films nobody knew about. And it kind of informed my love of art in kind of a different way, right? Because while other people were talking about avant-garde, different creative stuff, I would talk to those people and be like, "Yeah, but do you know about these guys?" And they'd be like, "No." So I was like even more obscure than those people, which if you're a Christian artist, you probably know what I'm talking about. But we're like as obscure as you can get quite often. Um, this goes into my idea of the kind of stuff that conservatives and Christians should be making. And I know I've spoken on this a little bit before, but conservatism isn't about like bad ideas and old stuff that's outdated. You know, the whole idea that old ideas are outdated is itself a silly idea.
Hmm.
Like if it's an old idea, it's an old idea because it's lasted for millennia. And that might mean it's connected to some kind of truth, some kind of lasting truth that might be existing in the universe, you know, like love or just the idea that science could be a thing means that truth must exist in the world somewhere. So it's because science is based and philosophy is based and math it's based on and physics is based on the idea that there's truth in the world. And if you know, even like journalism is about uncovering truth. To be into any of these things and then to think that truth doesn't exist is kind of ridiculous and contradictory. But the same thing is true for storytelling, myth making, legends. What was it? The man with a Thousand Faces or whatever, his story, the
Yeah.
monomyth, right? Just these ideas themselves kind of show that there's a compelling truth that kind of undergirds and binds together our society and nature itself, you know. So where you have an acceptance of these ideas, you have an acceptance of morality, right? Like fundamental rules to things. And so, but when people go a little too far off the deep end because they want to sell you some newfangled religion or cult or politics, right? Or some new product, snake oil salesmen, they call them. If you want to sell some new thing to people who want something new, they're tired of the old thing, they want something new. How are you going to know that thing's going to work? There's no history of it working. There's no like precedence set. Oh, this will do this to your body. We're putting some new chemical in your body.
Mm.
But, like, oh, sure, I've tried it before. You'll be fine. How about you do it first? I'm not going to do it because this idea of progressivism, right? This idea of, oh, this is the new best thing, assuming that everything new is good for you. It's such a ridiculous, unthinking position to take, for unthinking people. It's like the person that you can get into a room and then convince them to take any kind of drug. Like you're so bored and you want to be given approval by these people so much that you won't leave and say, leave me alone. You'll just take whatever drug they peer pressure you into taking. This is stuff that little silly people do. Little silly people. Um, I remember hearing these stories of kids in the neighborhood who would do things like that. Oh, that's why they're in the hospital because they did something they shouldn't have done, or they're deleted because they shouldn't have done that thing. And you're like, whoa, I'm glad I wasn't there. I'm glad that didn't happen to me. And of course, you have to start being a little bit wise, understanding that when you start thinking that way, you can do some really bad things. So this is the politics we have now. It's all just theoretical junk. It's the storytelling we have now in Hollywood. All just theoretical junk. It's all just theoretical. We don't want to make people feel bad, so we're going to tell stories for everybody else except for the normal people who just do things the way it's been done for thousands of years. You know, we don't need to have surgery done on our bodies. We're just normal, you know. So this is conservative versus some kind of liberal or progressive idea, conception that society should change for our whims. And no, how about try the best storytelling we've had for hundreds of years? Try digging into some Shakespeare. Try digging into some Dante. Try digging into John Milton. Try Homer. Why not do the story as it is and try to understand Greek society as it was instead of always trying to put your hands in it and manipulate it to kind of like try to modify it to today's modern society. Why would we modify it? How about if we just try to understand it as it is? Imagine you living in a neighborhood and you're always trying to take what your neighbor down the street does and change it to suit you. Yeah, they said this one thing, but I'm going to play telephone with it and change it. And then you're going to believe all kinds of things about them that are not true, right? This doesn't end well. Okay. Instead, what do? You should go to the horse's mouth and talk to them and make up your mind about them by going to them, directly to them, right? Don't go between some mediatrix that wants to modify it and play telephone. No, go straight to the stories. Go straight to understanding Greek society. Go straight to understanding John Milton when in the world he lived in, with Puritans and the English Civil War. You know anything about that? Well, why don't you try learning some things instead of always trying to destroy them and make them fit into our modern conception of things? That's going to take more work. Oh, you're not up for the truth. Okay. So this is the problem with the storytelling we've had. The storytelling we've had in Hollywood in the last 50 years is pseudo scientific. It's pseudo historical. It's pseudo ethical. That is to say, it's not ethical or moral or historically accurate. Do these people not even just study books about things? So we need some artists who care about history, care about all these things, and they're willing to do the research to faithfully, accurately depict these things. I think that'd be brilliant. Imagine instead of having to, like in Wayfinders, nothing against Wayfinders, but instead of reimagining Narnia, which it appears that they might be doing, instead of trying to reimagine it and modify it and make it fit modern society, modern conceptions of what that's going to look like, try to understand C.S. Lewis's conception of maybe fairy tales, maybe read up a little bit on what he thinks about fairy tales, maybe read up on what he thinks about the medieval world, right? Because you might think that just Narnia is influenced by his conception of the medieval world. You'd be wrong. His sci-fi is his conception of the medieval world too. I mean, he kind of makes fun of H.G. Wells and the more modern takes of science. He has kind of like a a really interesting take. If you go to that hideous strength, it gets even more interesting with that. It gets mythological in many ways. So why not just understand these things as they are? You know, that's a realist take. And that's difficult because that's really about the hard, deep lessons of life that artists are supposed to be the ones talking about to try to deal with life as it is, right? Instead of this pretend notion of, oh, we're going to help you deal with life by arguing, complaining about it, bickering and moaning about it, which I see that a lot these days from artists in Hollywood, bickering and moaning, complaining. There's always modern references to everything, and
Hmm.
we're trying to fit our modern era into this other environment. Like, stop trying to do that. I'm bored of it. I want to escape the modern era when I go into one of these stories, you know?
Yeah,
That just makes it more fun to me.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But I mean, there's other genres. It doesn't have to be sci-fi and fantasy. Like there's things like the Western because, we talk about a realist take, like the real world, living in the real world. Man, there's nothing more realist than a Western. Western is about literally about surviving in a desert. You could just get killed by a snake one day, or like people who come out for the gold rush and they're opportunists and they destroy your town and they take over and the lawman gets killed. And what are you going to do? You're there defending your family, right? And so this is often the scenario that a Western paints is the picture of law and order in the middle of like a desert or in the middle of the woods or in the middle of no man's land. There's no one else to help you, right? It's just you and nature and evil. What do you do with that? You know? I mean, I have speaking of Westerns, I have a little theory about what's going on with Jeremy Boring, but
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
you think so? I mean, it's kind of silly because it's probably not true, but like it's kind of like what my heart wants to be true. You really think I should say it? Okay.
Well, it can be a theory. It's just a theory.
You're right. It's just a theory. I know that there was speculation about a month ago about Jeremy Boring and how he left the CEO position of the Daily Wire. And so many people, of course, all the haters are going to come out of the woodwork and all this stuff. And the problem with the whole scenario, as I was saying, was like, well, what about the friends of the Daily Wire? What are we going to say, right, in defense? Like, what can we use as a defense to defend what's happening? We don't even know what's happening. See, we have to be reasonable, and we don't have the facts. So all the rumors get heard, but the facts don't get heard. So that creates a difficult scenario. But the fact is, though, and I put some of this in my article a while ago, but because I know other facts as well. But the fact is that, you know, I don't okay, I don't want to frame it that way because again, this is just a theory. And but here, just go down this scenario with me. I know that the producer in charge of most of Daily Wire's films was Dallas Sonnier, right? Of Cinestate, former Cinestate, and more recently of Bonfire Legend, right? This production company. If you watch a Daily Wire film, half the time you'll see in the front title card Bonfire Legend, right? So you know he's helped produce it. There's other producers as well, like Ken Carpenter sometimes, or Amy Presmick, these kinds of people. But there's also what happened when they made, or rather when they put together Bentkey and announced Bentkey, right? That's the thing is they didn't just make Bentkey, they announced Bentkey at a certain point. And then guess what they said right after that? Well, you can go get it right now. You can just subscribe, and there it is. You got a bunch of kids content. Wow, how'd that happen? Right? Just instantly? Just kids content instant? No. Obviously, they had been planning that for some time. They announced that they were going to do that like a year or two earlier. I don't remember how much earlier, but they announced they were investing into kids content. They announced Chipchilla, which never materialized apparently, but it became, well, no way, it did materialize. I was thinking of another one, Doodles with Oodles or something, which never materialized. But Chipchilla did, right? And Mabel McClay and a few other ones that they actually produced. They actually had a hand in producing. They didn't just license it and distribute it, right? They also produced quite a lot of kids' content.
Yeah, I think they did Kid
Oh,
Explorer.
Kid
That's what it's
Explorer.
called.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a good one.
He was a kid. The host is like a kid of one of the producers or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was good. My kids enjoyed that show actually.
Hmm.
Um, but my point is, right, that the way you got to watch the behavior, right, of how Daily Wire does things. Quite often they will already plan things out and do it and invest monies, and then they're looking for the opportune moment to announce it. And the opportune moment for Benke to announce it was the something anniversary of Disney coming up, right? And the fact that Disney was not being faithful to the original work of Snow White, which is why they also planned to make another Snow White starring Brett Cooper. And they also had that trailer drop, right? Which is a fairly small teaser trailer, but it was a trailer that was her. It wasn't AI or whatever, so it's like they planned that all out, waited for the right moment, and then bam, there's Bentkey. And so we know about what we know is not the information they're telling us, but what we know is some of the movements and actions of people behind the scenes. Sure, a lot of the workers have been let go from the Bentkey operation, the kids operation, but Jeremy Boring already kind of told us what he's doing. He said he's moving over to entertainment. What kind of entertainment do you think he means? Not kids' entertainment. They've already got that, right? They can just continue licensing content if they want. They don't need people on staff to continue making Mabel McClay or whatever. They can continue licensing it. It's a perfectly good branded streamer. So, but you know what they do need? They need something for adult entertainment. And guess what Dallas Sanier and some of the other people who worked on Pendragon Cycle have been doing? Dallas Sanier has been working on, with Thomas Jane, Army Hammer, big actors, a Western called Frontier Crucible, I think. And it's already been wrapped. They already shot it. They're just in post, I believe. And then more recently, Ryan Whitaker, the director, co-director of Pendragon Cycle, has also been working on, guess what? A Western with Josh Holloway, I believe his name is. Actually, let me take a look here. I might be able to share some of this. Look at that. Well, here's Ryan Whitaker's IMDb. What's he been doing? Says he was on Pendragon Cycle, surprised by Oxford 2023. Look at that. There's a Flint, known for Flint. What is Flint? He's also got this Plan for the Future, which is a G.K. Chesterton project. He's got Surprise by Oxford here, which is what got him the attention of Jeremy Boring. So he could do Pendragon Cycle. It still says it's 7 episodes, 2025. So it's still planned to be released this year. But look at Flint. Let's see what Flint is. So
No photos.
New Mexico Frontier, Louis L'Amour. That's a major Western writer. That's an authentic writer. Josh Holloway, remember him from Lost?
Mm-hmm.
Here is Ryan Whitaker's site, and he's got his blog, Josh Holloway to star in an adaptation of Louis L'Amour's Flint. So he's also producing it. Ken Carpenter's back as his producing partner. Mark Pentecost helping produce. That's cool, right? And
Yeah.
Bonfire Legend, remember, like I mentioned, Bonfire Legend is on Instagram. They mentioned all the Daily Wire stuff they did have done here, but also look at all their latest stuff. Western, Army Hammer, Thomas Jane. Sorry, I have to log in there. So, see, there's Thomas Jane, Frontier Crucible. He's the Bone Tomahawk producer. So why would Dallas, who has all these great assets helping him to make pictures like this, why have they not been making pictures like this at Daily Wire? Maybe they are. Maybe they are making pictures like this right under our noses, and they have yet to announce it. They just haven't announced it yet because what? This is what I've been saying for a while. Daily Wire needs to separate their entertainment efforts from their political and news efforts. These are two different kind of brandings. And the more they're united, the more all of the entertainment efforts will get all this controversy, undue controversy it doesn't need, and political talking that it doesn't need. It's just supposed to be good entertainment. And so I know that this is what Jeremy Boring has said from the beginning, but they couldn't do that. They had to be this one company that makes money on politics so they could build a foundation, a subscriber-based support for what they're doing, for their intentions of what they're doing. So they couldn't go on a limb and make a Hollywood-style production company making just great entertainment. Nobody's going to care. It's just like Hollywood, right? Well, guess what? If they make the intentions known, first of all, that they're conservatives, they care about values, right? They're diehard conservatives. They're going to do the right thing. They have to build confidence in their audience that they're the real deal. They're not like all the other crazy people in LA, right? And so I think about now would be a good time for them to make that branding separation, which is to say, I've left Daily Wire, but what we're doing now is making things like Westerns, action movies, maybe in the future, dramas that have good morals in them, right? Reflect good morals. Maybe some kind of Shakespearean dramas, stuff that's sophisticated, that has older values embedded in it, right? Stuff like a Western does this really well, but it does not shy away from things like violence, right? And problems of life and death and law and order. So this would be a really smart move. This is my theory, but it would be a really smart move if Jeremy Boring just announced, maybe they made sure, maybe they're waiting for the right opportune moment, like they did with Benke and Disney and stuff. Maybe they're waiting for the right opportune moment. I'm not sure what that moment would be, but they're in post-production in these Westerns. They've got people like Travis Mills, Dallas Saunier, Ryan Whitaker. They could probably get five other directors who want to make Westerns, conservative style Westerns. Bam, 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 line them up in a year. If they just make a few good Westerns. I mean, I liked Terror on the Prairie, but I think it was a little too brooding and intense without much happening. There's a lot of like mood and tone, but not a lot of things happening. They need real, like more realistic stuff that also draws in the vein of older Westerns like Louis L'Amour written stuff. I think he did Lonesome Dove. I think Louis L'Amour did Lonesome Dove. I'm not sure. He's definitely a well-known Western writer. So that's my theory. I think that he's going to announce that Jeremy Boring is going to release fantasy stuff like Pendragon Cycle, potentially a sci-fi coming that might be the Ayn Rand project, because that's sort of sci-fi-ish, and Western. Those would be three great, very male-oriented um, genres to release good conservative entertainment and really annoy Hollywood that way. I think that would really annoy people in Hollywood, which is what you want. It's what we all want deep down inside. I know it is. I know that you can't convince me otherwise. We all want deep inside to upset Hollywood so desperately. I know I do. So let's make stuff that upsets Hollywood. I would love that. I would, you would just bring a tear to my eye if Jeremy Boring would announce. I know this is best wishes, you know, who knows what's actually going on. It could be that he's actually lost in a haze at some kind of corner bar in El Paso, drying his tears, wishing he was CEO again of Daily Wire. Who knows? But it would be pretty based if he was like, I was planning this all along, and here I am, and now we got two amazing Westerns, maybe even three or four projects, and we're going to release them. And it's a different branded entertainment company that's just to make God's honest, great entertainment with good values in it. That would be the thing to do. Maybe
Sounds
they
good.
could even release a C.S. Lewis sci-fi one day.
Yeah.
That would be cool. But the thing I love about it, for example, in comparison to a lot of the other faith-based outfits like Angel, who's the king of this group, but other people like 5 and 2 Studios and the Wonder Project, the thing about them is that they don't seem to have the same level of quality, frankly, as even the Daily Wire, who gets a lot of complaints. Like a lot of people complain about Daily Wire, but I mean, if you look at the Pendragon Cycle production diaries, it's kind of inspiring because they look high quality. They look Hollywood level quality, like a Game of Thrones style fantasy series. And that's pretty inspiring. I'm just saying
Would
they should do it. That's what should be happening.
be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an entertainment guy, so it's like whenever I see the Daily Wire guys, whether it's Matt Walsh or whatever on YouTube somewhere, I'm like, I'm bored because I don't want to hear them talk about politics all the time. I'm just bored of that. I want good storytelling, you know? All the influencer stuff just starts to bore me. I want good storytelling again, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm excited. I've been mostly a fan of Angel Studios lately because they're putting out great stuff like the Wayfinders now. That's pretty impressive. And Sketch, right? And Fablehaven coming out next year. Man, Angel's knocking it out of the park with these projects. So my hope is that Daily Wire is doing something inspiring like that. Pretty cool stuff. Because Angel would probably not put out like a Terror on the Prairie type film, some dude getting scalped. They're just not going to put that out. I mean, I don't blame them. They're a lot of their stuff is for families and stuff, which is good. We need that stuff too. So this is the thing that Daily Wire are the people who could and would do that. And that's why I hope they're doing it. Like we need some conservative movie that has the balls to have terrible violence, but also have a good moral point to it. You know, that I mean, that's another puzzle, a piece of the puzzle that we need because we got to replace Hollywood. And you need all these little elements to replace. And we'll also need a horror outfit at some point, somebody who does horror really well, like mythological horror, like really interesting mythological horror. Um, I don't know who's going to do that, man. Sheesh. But we need something like that too. And it could happen. I think it could happen. Got to replace these people from LA, man. They're not educated. They don't know what they're talking about. Like if you ever watch Metatron on YouTube, he's talking about how he's afraid that Christopher Nolan is going to ruin the Odyssey for him. He's like, ah, why won't they just do these things correctly? You know? But of course, Metatron's like a serious history enthusiast, so he wants to as close to history as possible. And like for example, just a small example of that is he was talking about how Nolan's images for the Odyssey are showing up with like kind of like Hollywood style bronze armor from that era. And Metatron's like, no, they painted. They often were very colorful and did their stuff with different colors and bright colors and stuff. And hardly ever Hollywood depicts this correctly. And so I'm like, you know what? I don't know what I like more because I love Hollywood's version of it, but also we've never seen what Metatron's talking about. So imagine if some inspiring artist, filmmaker was like, let's really study this and make a new competing version of what the old Greek world would look like and try to make it look authentic. Like,
Yeah.
what would that be like? That'd be pretty cool. It could be.
Yeah.
It's up to your imagination. But I think Nolan is trying to do the more, you know, trying to look very sophisticated according to today's standards. which I think most artists think that way, you know. But I really like the idea of trying to stay authentic to history and then deal with your limitations as an artist. Let that be your limitation that you have to just deal with as an artist, you know, almost like it's a theoretical limitation. Like just imagine that your teacher was like, you can only shoot this movie with three lights, a camera with no filter, and blah blah blah. You know, like these are your limitations. And there are film movements that have done this to teach filmmaking. They'll limit the tools of their artist. And imagine if the studio is like, we will let you make the Iliad or the Odyssey, but you have to do it according to these historical standards. This historical rigor must be present. Wow, what would an artist do with that? I think that would just actually just make it very exciting if you think about it. I don't know. That's just me. So, conservative art, what's that look like? We've barely ever seen it.
We got t-shirts.
We do.
And these will be available for you at some point.
At some point, yes. We have to kind of create some kind of store or something. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do, but Rebecca's going to help me with it, right?
Sure, we'll do it.
Thank you. All right. We'll talk more about some other subjects because we've got some other subjects we might talk about later, maybe next week, including our move and what we're going to be doing there. So we have to develop that a little bit more though. But love you guys and stand up for the culture and for conservative art. Love you guys. Have a great weekend. Bye.